Thanks for those comments. One thing that I want to say to that about it taking time is this process has taken a little bit longer than we thought, but part of that is because of the deep learning and deep conversations that we've had. And so while we're confident we're going to get this thing up and moving by spring, it's been a pleasure to be working with this group and really understand their perspectives of safety. And I think in the long term, it will help us get it right.
Other questions? Director Chandagiri.
Thank you, Dr. Udo Sunata. I really appreciate, this is not easy job by any means. This is going to be a long-term project. So I really commend you for finally getting to this because, there is no perfect solution. None of us have. We have to have some grace in understanding that we all kind of have to learn as we go. And it's like changing oil while you're driving your car. You have to take short-term measures.
Have you done that before?
Well, I haven't. Nobody has. And it is like we have to take steps to make sure safety is assured while we are planning the long-term things. So, because even a teacher, it's not just the child who is going through a difficult time. It's 100% of other children and other teachers are vicariously getting traumatized. The learning becomes impossible. So I really appreciate that you're taking this head on, and I hope the community gets to see in a little bit more real time what steps are being taken, because there is a disconnect between what the community's perception of what is being done. They see what comes out in the newspaper. And we all know what comes out in the newspaper is often not pretty. So what they don't see is the real-time steps that needs to be taken is being taken. It's not just like binary solution, one or the other. It is probably, as Director Salazar said, we need to have systems in place, as the student task force has suggested, and make sure that there is solid accountability, the community participation. Even a local community can hire the person to make sure, so they have full faith in the person who is working there. So I hope we put some systems in place rather than one or the other solution moving forward. That's what I would like to see. At the end of the day, 7 of us have to be fully responsible for the safety of every child, every teacher, every staff. And that is where, as a board, we do carry that fiduciary duty and we have to be responsible. We report to the community, and parents ask, why is my child assaulted, or why is this child getting into trafficking, or whatever happens, we need to go back and be able to tell them, you send your kid to our school, they'll be safe. So let's work towards that. That's what I would like to see. Water under the bridge, it's gone, but moving forward, we shouldn't waste this crisis.
Well, we haven't got to the actual application, what it will look like right now. We're fleshing out with the design and we're walking our way backwards. And so we spent a lot of time trying to determine what are the outcomes that we're looking for with this group. And in doing that, the next question is, okay, who needs to be there? And then how do we ensure that we have opportunities for diverse representation on there and that we have the right voices at the table. And so we meet on Wednesdays, and so we have a meeting tomorrow on Wednesday, and we're going to really start fleshing that out. And so I think that according to this timeline, though, in the next 2 to 3 weeks, this thing will really start coming together. For the last month and a half, it was a lot of learning and then piecing together what these themes are, how to put these themes into context, and then what kind of monitoring systems we could anticipate standing up, just so that we can help be a steward to the new group that comes in as we assemble the entire group.
I want to say something to Director Chandagiri too, and to our community. There is a perception of safety which is being discussed within this very important work, and the perception of safety, especially for proponents of on the topic that's being raised of SROs, they suggest that the presence of SROs make schools safer somehow for students, educators, staff, and make parents feel safe. However, research also states that our students, especially our Black and Brown, Indigenous students with disabilities don't also feel safe and are more are choosing to miss school, skip school because they don't feel safe at that same environment, because that environment is no longer safe for them. So in this research, there's been studies that have found little or no connection between the presence of SROs in the perception of school safety. And my recommendation is, or question is, how much discussion is the actual investment in counseling, mental health support, nurses, so that we are actually addressing the issues that create these disobedient, misconduct, teenage, adolescent behaviors that are creating disruptions in their learning, if not to them personally, to their fellow peer students.
We have, in our current group, we have different sources of learning. One of them is through research and reports on school safety, both nationally and locally, and we intend to tap into those resources as well, so that we can do learning on what the impacts are for students on everything from the presence of law enforcement to what is the mental health trends for students nationally. What are, we would even talk about anxiety in school, suicide, being seen, being heard, being acknowledged. Those are, there's a lot of research on that, and so we intend to go into that. And then also we want to draw on local resources as well. So we have reports from the state on student safety. We have our panorama data. We have our NYU report, and we even have the local coalition of safe schools and the Safe Schools and Communities Coalition, which publishes an annual report on student sense of well-being and safety as well. And so we intend to tap into all of those resources to help guide our work.
Just air of caution, in my research on this is found that, reported in multiple articles, it was found that a lot of states, counties, cities, districts do not report as transparent when they're dealing with student arrest and school to prison pipelines.
So we'll need to be critical thinkers and consumers as we look at those reports.
Yes,
Thank
please.
you.
Thank you for all the work that you've done. I think my one request would be, well, I'll probably have more than one request. Let's be real. Because we've talked so much as a board about all of the data that we asked the district to provide in our packets, I think when we were developing our strategic plan, we were hoping that this body would be one of the spaces that can be looking at how all of, and you're probably already on this path, but how all those data elements are telling us something. And we as a board, once a month at our larger business meetings, don't have time to do the deep dive into all of that data and have it tell us something that's actionable. And so my hope is that this committee in particular would find some sort of method for raising up the core issues that data is telling us something, with all of the other things that you're incorporating into the committee, and report out monthly. Maybe it's something like a one-page report to the board, so we know what are the core issues that are popping up, what's the committee recommending, and what can the board do to help, because it is such a core responsibility for the board to ensure the safety of our kiddos in public schools and the educators and staff working there. And so I think we all are anxious to know how we can help and what's happening on the ground level that is something that we can take action on. I've been sort of thinking about it, since this is a work session, like a think tank, right? This group that you're putting together has all the brains and experience to be able to look at all of that and tell us what it means, bringing all the factors in through an equity lens so that the board's informed, instead of us pulling one data element out and worrying about that or raising it and that not being helpful to the whole system.
Part of the role of this group is to be researchers and curators. part is for people to come with their lived experiences and share what they see, either in their practice as students or as staff. And part of it is to be almost operating in an administrative type role, right? And that's where we have to establish a governance, and that's what's kind of slowed down the process, because we have to determine, is this going to be a standing committee? What's going to be the commitment? Will it be a two-year commitment? What will the system of governance be around this group? So those are, and how are we what's our responsibility to the board and to the public too in this work? And so those are things that we really need to get a jump start on, and then really flesh out as a committee as we delve into the work. But I think we can accommodate some of the requests that you discussed. We have to really start with the outcomes and then determine how do we get to those outcomes. Is it through a system of, do we develop, I'll use a very generic, but maybe a real goal that we might have. We might, as a committee, decide that we want to develop a system for tracking instances of hate and discrimination in schools. So what would be the structures that we put in place to monitor that, and then how would we establish what the effectiveness was of that monitoring tool, and then how is that impacting student experience, and how is that having an overall effect on student safety, right? So that's one way to look at it. Another way is to look at an action. I'm kind of hearing maybe an action item. And so is this going to be an action committee versus an advisory committee? An advisory committee might advise the board or the district on how to move forward, whereas an action committee might be a little bit more active, if you will, in carrying out tasks that promote school safety. So those are still things that we don't have the answers to, but we will explore in earnest when we get back together.
I think from the way I understand is the board's responsibility is safety. You'll have to come up with some way to demonstrate that this is how we are measuring safety. And then by an executive limitation, we have delegated it to the superintendent so that you make that happen by changing policies, practices, training, resources, etc. And the question is, then you keep reporting back to us with some metrics, some numbers, or some on a regular basis so that we have some kind of informed oversight into the direction we are going. So if these policies are not making the changes that we are intending to, or if this committee begins to see, or the teachers are seeing that it's not heading in the right direction, what steps will be taken to say, look, this is not working, we need to make a change? It's like you write a prescription for an antibiotic, patient is getting worse, then you have to change the medication, right? So how do you change policies or practices halfway when you realize you're not heading in the right direction? And what steps will there be? Who have oversight over that at an operational level?
Director Chandragiri, you mentioned very clearly that there's been lots of reports in the paper, and I think one of those came from you, and you said it multiple times tonight. The complete disregard of our safety systems and our threat assessment system. So your opinion, and I know you're running for office, so I understand the need to create energy around a campaign, but sorry, I'm bothered by this on behalf of our staff, because the people that you recognized last month, the people that stood back there, and the people that you walked up to and said to Courtney McCarthy, wow, the threat assessment, you have a model system. Those things, in making those comments, the people that show up every day for the safety of our kids were totally dehumanized. And I got a chance to sit with our police chief this last week and talk about prevention. And isn't it exciting? We have a police chief talking about prevention. And we were talking about our system and that we were stronger than ever as a preventative system. Was a totally different narrative from people who understand safety. Now, we can always do better. But I just want to say, and I called Courtney after that because the amount that Courtney takes and the amount that Chris and his team take every day, they're showing up in such incredible ways. They're cultural navigators out in our community. They're talking about gang violence like nobody else in the community is talking about. They're setting up volunteer programs in our schools so kids can see people that look like them, that are models. And each thing they do, we have people that want to dehumanize their work, and it's just not very cool. So sorry if I'm emotional about it, but I just want you to know the impact on the people who show up every day to have safety in our schools. So when I was talking to Courtney about our threat assessment system, the thing she reminded me of is that our threat assessment never starts with the police. Never. It starts with us, because we are the keepers of the preventative system. We know the kids, we know the challenges, we know the threats they're posing. Now, we engage law enforcement. And our police chief would say, of the city of Salem, would say, is stronger than ever. So on that, I would like you to do a fast run through for our safety systems so we can all be reminded of the good work we do and be a little reassured when people make stuff up that isn't true about us.